I can't believe it's already the beginning of June. Where did time go? This month went by so crazy fast. Each week was flying by. And in that span of time, I was able to complete 5 books. So this is a stack of books that I read this month. Ta-da! So, like every other month, let's do a reading recap and go through all of the books that I read this month. So, starting with the first book that I read this month, Vienna Prelude. So an instructor at the Author Conservatory actually recommended that I read this series while I was going through the outlining of the current novel that I am drafting. So I pulled up a tab with it and I kind of just left the tab open because that's how I remember things. I just have 1,000 tabs opened at all times. And I actually forget about things because it all gets cluttered. Moving on, I had a tab open and I was like, oh, this is cool. Didn't really get into it. And then a few days later, my best friend was like, hey, I'm reading this book. And I'm like, wait a second. I was just recommended these books. What do you think? And she said she really enjoyed them. So I went on eBay and I found them and I gave an offer that was considerably lower than what they asked. And I got 6 books for $20. So that's always a win when you love books. So about the actual book, I felt like it was a little bit slow at the beginning, but that might have been me just getting into it. I haven't read the Zion Chronicles, so I'm not familiar with the characters. I'm just jumping in with the Zion Covenant series. So it took a little bit of time to get into it and get into the characters. There was a lot of setup that had to happen because I wasn't familiar with the characters. But once I got into it, it was really good. Felt like Eliza was a really interesting character, and I really enjoyed her interactions. I also really enjoyed the character Murphy. He was really awesome. I loved his take on it as a reporter that wasn't involved in Germany and all of the politics there. I didn't really love some of his reactions to certain things. I'm not going to spoil anything because there was one reaction specifically later on in the book that I wasn't too keen on, but that probably was just me. I also really loved the thread of violins going through it. I recognized a lot of the makers of the violins from being a violinist myself. It's kind of fun to see the violins go through Nazi Germany and have secrets brought along with them. And I really felt like everything with Rudy's violin and the reveal about what she got stuck with in Berlin and all of that was really woven together super well. It was really gripping and emotional and just, it really tied you in and brought you into this story. And I overall really enjoyed the Vienna Prelude. The next book that I read was In the Shadow of the River. So this book reminded me a lot of The Greatest Showman. Think The Greatest Showman on a riverboat. That's a showboat. So there's a lot of acts and music and plays and all sorts of different shows that are going on this showboat as these characters are all living together and traveling performers. I thought the cast of characters was really good. I would have liked to see things intensified a bit more than they did, but she kept a pretty good tension throughout the whole book. So the first half of this book is when the main character is young before her mother dies, and then the other half of it skips however many years until she's grown up and a young teenage girl on the showboat as the main female performer, and she loves her showboat life. I did enjoy the cast of characters. I really enjoyed Duke. I felt like he was a really neat character. I liked Gabe and how sweet and protective he was. From the beginning, I knew something was up with Perry. Right from the beginning. I didn't love Cameron either. I felt like he was just a little overdone, and that brings me to my next thing. I felt like some of the character motivations were a little bit blunt. Like instead of being subtle and letting the reader come to the conclusion, they were just bluntly said in conversation in a way that I don't exactly feel like people talk, and that made a few scenes just feel a little bit forced. That might have just been me reading slow or reading when I wasn't paying much attention, but that was just a few of my thoughts while I was reading through it. There was a bit of romance in the book, and it was one of those love things that drives me nuts when it's like, if they just spoke plainly, things would have been fine. They would not have assumed that the other person was in love with somebody else. It just drives me crazy when the characters just don't talk to each other. And it's like, why don't you just talk to each other? It's not going to hurt anything. Just say, hey, I think I like you. Wait, you like me? Whoa, we like each other. And then you don't have to go through the whole misunderstanding, which is the whole book. And those are really hard to do well. So sometimes I like them if they're done really, really super well, where it's more than just the characters are too scared to talk to each other that is keeping them apart. Then I think those are interesting. But sometimes when it's just like the characters are just wimps and they won't get out of their comfort zone and confront one another, that drives me crazy. So I did feel like that part of the romance was kind of annoying multiple times through the book, and that was mostly just because they could have talked to each other and they could have resolved things if they had just spoken up. Like, there really wasn't any reason why they couldn't just say the truth. and that kind of annoyed me. But overall, I did enjoy this book. There was a great level of tension throughout the book, and the characters were fun, and their interactions were neat. And I haven't actually read anything in a long time about riverboats in that whole era of America. So that was fun. So that was In the Shadow of the River. The next book I read is The Keys to Gramercy Park, and I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I loved this book. It was so good. She did a phenomenal job with the writing, especially. I mean, okay, the plot itself was great, but let me just give a shout out to the writing. She did a phenomenal job writing this book. She did a really great job crafting the words, and the sentences really drew you in. There was nothing amateur about the writing, and I loved it. I really felt like this was top-notch writing. She did a phenomenal job, and it just sounded really believable and well thought through, and not at all forced. So I loved the writing. It flowed so well. It was awesome to read. So the story itself was awesome. It really drew me in right from the beginning. I love dual timeline, dual POVs, where it's like one character's in historical times and one character's in modern times. And I mean, sometimes their stories weave together and you figure it out right from the beginning. Sometimes they don't, and you have to figure it out as you go. And I mean, I just really like this sort of stories. So this one was right up my alley. I really had zero idea how the two timelines would be combined, but I really enjoyed how she gave hints and dropped them throughout the story and just made it all come to life, and it was just great. And I really loved the romance in it. It was just really good. I also really loved the contemporary characters. I don't know why, sometimes with the historical contemporary dual timeline things, I don't know, I always tend to like the contemporary ones better. And that might be just because I'm always reading historical fiction, so to try contemporary is really fun for me. But I did really enjoy her contemporary characters. The historical ones, though, they had a lot of depth and were very interesting and complex. And it was really neat just to see everything come to life and come together. So basically, the story follows an investigative journalist who works for the Smithsonian who is waiting tables, and she's looking for her next story, and she finds this counterfeit bill in her apartment. And so she goes through this whole road, and along that way, she meets this guy, and there's a whole romance that follows with this, and it's really, really well written, and you learn how everything ties together, and it's really awesome. But there was one line right when I started reading that I just loved, so I thought I would share it with you. So this scene takes place right at the beginning. I'm 16 pages in, and it's right after the two characters meet. Then she waited a few more tables, packed a to-go bag, and helped with a minor crisis in the kitchen, all while trying to escape the memory of that man's amazing eyes. If they truly were windows to the soul, then his told Andrea he was a good, caring guy who took life seriously but still had a little fun. Or he could be a serial killer. In this city, one can never be certain based on first impressions. That made me laugh first time reading through it. So I bookmarked it and I was like, I just need to share it because it's fun. So moving on, the next book that I read is a throwback to one that I read a couple times when I was younger and really loved. It is The Scarlet Pimpernel. So this was one of my favorite books through my early teens, and it launched me into the French Revolution, one of my favorite time periods in history, where I have read so many articles on and read so many novels, and I just love the French Revolution. It's such an interesting time in human history. So this was the book that skyrocketed me into the French Revolution, and I've just been wanting to read something that was a throwback for a while. To be honest, the reason I started reading this was, yes, because I did want to read a throwback, but also because I needed to read an ebook, and it was an ebook on my iPad, and we were going to be at a recital, and I wanted to read a book because I don't have a great attention span for recitals. And I like reading when I have background music. So I read it on my iPad, and I got like 3/4 of the way done during the recital because the recital went past midnight. So it was a long recital, so I got a lot of reading done. The next day, my brother was teasing me about it, and he was like, Anna, that was a really low point. And then my other brother was like, but it was still a really great idea. And I'm like, see? It's justifiable. It was a good idea. So I started reading The Scarlet Pimpernel, and it only took me a few days to read because of that long stretch of reading. But overall, I just love this book. It's one of my favorite historical fictions that's set in the French Revolution. It just got so much depth and so much mystery. So the story follows a daring Englishman, the Scarlet Pimpernel, whose sole goal and desire is to save and rescue captives from the clutches of the French Revolution. And so the story takes place with the Scarlet Pimpernel, a French Revolution spy who's determined to figure out the identity of the Scarlet Pimpernel, and then a woman named Marguerite who is stuck in a precarious situation where she's either faced with the odds of discovering who the Scarlet Pimpernel is and saving her brother's life, or dun dun dun, you have to read the book to find out. It's a really great mystery, and I just love this book. And the next book that I read is Counterfeit Faith. And I'm sorry, but it's a good thing I don't judge the cover, because I do not like this cover. I'm sorry. It's just not greatly photoshopped, and it's really tinted green. And it's just a personal preference. I don't really love it. But the book itself is really good. She's doing a really great job of weaving together all the different elements of this story and just bringing the characters to life. What's really funny, though, is I've done 2 counterfeit books in 1 month. This is a counterfeit book. This is a counterfeit book. And I don't read books about counterfeit money, but I don't know why this month I happen to read 2. So this story follows a young woman who is serving the delinquents of society, where she's in a refugee home, where she's caring for these children and helping them. And through it, she gets into this whole scheme that risks her life. I mean, the stakes are very high in this book, and things just keep happening that make the stakes higher. And she is faced with many choices along the way. So there's just a lot of stakes as this story is weaving through the characters and their discovery as they're trying to expose the possible counterfeit plot that is wrecking and abusing these children in this refugee home without losing their own lives in the process. So these are all the books that I read this month. I really can't believe that I've read this many books, because this month has been so crazy and so hectic in so many ways, and I don't know how I had time to read all these books, but I did. And you know, with summer coming up and all the vacations that happen, I'm looking forward to having a lot of time in the car to do some more reading. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a comment. What did you read this month? What did you enjoy? What did you not enjoy? Give a review for the books that you read this month, and share with me if you have any that I should be adding to my to-be-read list. And for a little last update, my life is hectic right now. Things are just crazy busy, and I'm loving it, but it's just a lot. So for the next 2 weeks, we're gonna hold off on videos, and I'll come back with maybe a life update where I can share some details of what's going on in my life and why I have been so busy, because I do have reasons. I'm not just reading. If I was just reading, this stack would be like way higher. So hopefully I'll see you again in a couple of weeks. I mean, all of these books are romances. Sorry. Yeah, they all are romances, I guess. I really like romances right now.